But thank you very much for taking a minute out today to kind of collaborate on talking about this project. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Thank you for your time. I'm
Yeah.
glad we made it happen.
So where are you located, respectfully, here?
At the moment, I'm in New York, but I normally am based in Atlanta and I'm from Istanbul.
Okay. Excellent.
And I'm in Durham, North Carolina, and I live in Durham.
Okay.
But I had been living in New York, basically doing New York stuff for about 15 years
Okay.
before coming. Yeah.
Okay. So before we get into Explorers, I want to know that 4 years ago, we were still wrapping our heads around this pandemic. How long is it going to last? What is it going to ultimately do? How did you survive the pandemic? And how did it influence this recording or change the way that you approach things?
Hmm.
Wow. That's, I was
Yeah.
not expecting that, which is great.
Hitting the ground running.
Well, I about the connection directly to this. I can make some connections, tangential ones. But the first thing comes to mind is that it is because of the pandemic that a tour I had with Matt Maneri uh, was changed. So we had a concert booked at Duke and Black Mountain College in Asheville, and also down in Columbia, South Carolina. And we've done a couple of records. We've done a lot of touring and a lot of playing. So we're like a long-standing duo. And then we had this Duke said, well, it was a COVID spike, and Duke said, we can't do the concert. I said, well, we have this contract, and plane tickets and things have been purchased. And so I said, what if you just let me stream it? We'll just do it in my living room. They said, that's fine. So we set up in the living room. This was not 2019, but it was a spike in COVID. It was 22, February 22. And we played the concert in my living room, and a few people came, and then called it Sanctuary Series. And then that's how it started. And then now we're doing concert number 29 later this month. And it's music and movement. And Ipek came actually, so it is related. So Ipek came to Durham partly because of that activity. And one of the things that happened was that she played a solo set on the series. And we also, as part of that set of things and activities, we did um, two live performances, one of which became Explorers.
Excellent. So ultimately, how did you two meet? Was it because of this show? How did this musical union take place?
Exactly. So it was beautifully impromptu. We actually did not plan to um, record, but whenever I go to play anywhere, I make sure to have all my equipment to record, mainly to listen to myself afterwards and just reflect, but also for the potential for occasions like this. And I remember we can go into more about the like during and playing, but I remember afterwards we looked at each other and Daniel and I were like, wow, that was something else. And we were both glad that that was recorded. We just went somewhere that beautifully we didn't expect. I mean, it was going to be great. It was going to be fun, but it really was something else. So that's how it literally we started talking to each other for Sanctuary, for his music series that I was coming up there, and then we were gonna do and I said, would you play with me? And he was like, yeah. And then we went up there, as it's written in the album description, as album program notes. We met an hour before we started playing at a gallery at Greensboro, and then we just played after that whenever we got a chance, and then in the span of a couple days.
So talk about this album. What was the artistic vision going in? How did all of this kind of become a reality?
It well, the term what I think this record is more than I mean, there are lots of different ways to make records, right? And you can like have a concept ahead of time and have a goal, you can do a lot with documenting a lot and then saying, what do I have here, and shape a record out of it. Sort of like there's a quote, the quote attributed to Brancusi. You know what I'm talking about? He's because he was famous for making horses, sculptor. And how do you do that? How do you make these great horses? It's easy. Just cut away everything that wasn't a horse.
Right.
I love it.
So the Brancusi method of record production, and then there's another way that I think this was, which was that it was about saying this record is something that was a document of a special experience that we think stands up and was valid for us and valid for the audience that evening. And we say this is worth releasing because we think that it has its own merits as a document. So that's the way this record was made. It was really focused on the live performance, and we were thinking about the challenges and opportunities that the situation presented us with, which was first time we're going to have a duo using the acoustic cello and acoustic piano in a very lovely space with great acoustics. Because the first duo we did was in a different kind of acoustic. It was electronics and amplified cello. Was it amplified? I don't
No,
remember.
you
No,
sound beautifully amplified, but you weren't amplified that day.
Okay, but I was competing with the amplification. And then when we did this, it was like, okay, now we have these acoustic instruments. It's all this wood, the wood floors, and it's like we both have very heavy backgrounds in classical stuff, as well as being improvisers. And I think it was an opportunity for us to think about, like, we both lived, I'm sure, we haven't talked about this exactly, but I'm sure you lived in a lot of cello sonatas. You've done them, and like James music with like strings and piano, and just being in that world, but also both having left that world too, and being able to relate through that shared tone world and gestures, but also not be kind of boxed in by it, and use that connection as a launching pad to play and find new spaces. Because I will say, I think this, the title Explorers, I think that's a big part of what our ethos was, which is like, what can we find that we've never thought of before?
So at the end of the day, what are you hoping the listener gets from this project?
Want to take that? Yeah.
I think I love the connections that you made, Daniel. It's absolutely the backgrounds that we had, I think, with just in there in our music, that we can't as much as we want to stay away from it, sometimes it's all blended in. And I think because we were coming from a similar background, that we were kind of free to let it all go. And we one of the things is that I like doing is just going to a place and meeting with an improviser for the first time and playing. And the magic that's in there, the concentration that you have and the possibilities that you haven't planned yet is massive. And I believe that that's not really something that's presented in the albums and record world. It's more about, let's make it perfect and make sure that it is as, as planned as possible, that we know how people will feel and how I want to make it minute by minute. And what we were doing there is just like letting ourselves free in a way that just explore the other musician, explore the sound, explore the space, explore with the audience. And when we were really allowing all of that happen, rather than just like, oh, I want to plan this next thing, or I do the thing that I planned. And it was completely this new space, like also in the program notes that we just arrived in a sandbox with Daniel, and then just we started playing. No one was thinking, oh, he's playing better, I'm playing better. We were just making a castle that we haven't planned before. I think there's something really special about that, that naive intimacy that between two people that's completely about sounds. And that was one of the things that we definitely wanted to share with everyone other than the people who were listening to us that day.
And I would say, as far as for me, if I think about what I would like the listener to get out of it, is I would like them to be able to have um, sort of a feel like they're having a real time experience of discovery and intimacy. Because I think that one thing that we did, and one thing that I didn't mention in terms of the cello piano classical connection, is also not just the sounds and the materials, but it's really what happens in that music when you're playing chamber music, which is an incredibly intimate way of relating. You're breathing together. The nuances are very detailed and high relief, and high contrast. And so I would like the listener to be able to experience that discovery and experience it as an intimate conversation with someone that you just met, because you can have those kinds of experiences. And part of what we also did was by design, which was to have solos from each of us before the duo, which really says, let the audience, the listener, have an chance to say, okay, let me experience this artist as themselves, in their own space and defining their own world. And then let me experience this one. And now I have a better understanding of how to experience their collective and their conversation, because they've gone deep into the world of each person first. So that was part of what I also like. We wouldn't want to put the duo before the solos. Like, you have to go through the solos and then hear the duo, so it's a progression. So I would hope that the listener kind of goes in that journey.
You know, it's always interesting to me, especially in the world of jazz, that there's such a level of interchangeability. You can meet each other and very quickly you can start recording or start collaborating. It just doesn't happen in a lot of other genres. And I always find that fascinating, how quickly you said you met and then you started going. But I guess that's kind of the nature. I can't shake this documentary I just saw the other day. You said Atlanta. And I saw a documentary on the Indigo Girls, and I haven't really looked into them, and I didn't realize they were from there. And I just kept thinking, there's no way those two would have been able to do this if it wasn't those two doing it. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like the Beatles. There's no way that a band like that would have been able to do that without having that kind of chemistry. And I think that's the thing that the civilian audience member doesn't realize, is that there's this level of compatibility that is obviously an album, but they don't realize the chemistry behind it and how it got to this point. Like you two, like you guys really felt this musical chemistry and it just took off. And maybe people don't realize that.
I think a piece of that is that, oh, well, let me just say this piece, which is that I think that you can accelerate the formation of that pretty, like, intentionally, by, you have to kind of go through a thing with yourself psychologically where you are just going to go and you're going to trust. So you have to kind of you have to kind of tend your garden and cut out all the things where you're, like Ipek was talking about, where comparisons to each other, value judgments, ego things. Like, you have to get rid of a lot of stuff in order to be able to just say, you know what, I'm not quite sure what the outcome will be, but let me see what happens if I just kind of jump off. Maybe I'll land on a magic carpet. And so if both people are willing to do that, you can very quickly access sort of the best and purest of whatever, the conversation is going to be. So I feel like it's both the combination of people, but also the willingness of the people to do that with one another. And then you can let go of some of the formalities and you can get right to it.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that I wholeheartedly agree. Yes, it was a beautiful chemistry through the fact that we were both ready to be vulnerable. And I use the word vulnerable in the most positive way as possible, because that's when I'm open to experiences, and that's when me is not as in all the things I know, but me is in the moment, that who's living the thing, who's creating the thing. And to me, it's literally a physical thing sometimes. Like, I start in the moment, and when I feel that people I'm playing with are as ready as I am at that moment, it's a way, it's like it takes off.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's just going to be this awesome, perfect thing. It's actually just letting that idea go completely. It's this, I am ready for whatever it is, as mundane or as beautiful, as chaotic. I am willing to go there with this other musician, because he or she, they are holding my hand, and we're doing this together. That feeling, that togetherness, um, and just feeds the trust.
Yeah.
So, and then they keep feeding each other throughout this the music making.
So at this point, once a journalist, is talking to you about this album, you've already moved on. There's a rear view mirror, and it's speeding past, and you're going to the next thing. But staying in that kind of existential moment here, what are you doing to promote this album as far as live shows? What's going on for future collaborations? How does this Waiting for Godot spin out here?
It is it when did this happen? We were so quick. It was just like, we want to share this. I think it happened in
February,
February.
February, yeah, February.
Yes, and I got that mixed and mastered. We got it mixed and mastered, and we are at the moment so our record is from Eyes and Ears Records, and Matthew has been doing a lot, contacting a lot of people for us, which is I'm very grateful. And Daniel and I frequently talk about what we will be doing. He was just in Portugal to play wonderful concerts. I'm touring this summer, and we even have a impromptu plan. Who knows that we might see each other this summer and then play somewhere. But our main goal is to have some collaborations again this fall. But in the meantime, we will be individually promoting it at the concerts that we're playing with other musicians or solo. I try to stay quite active on social media. Mainly as just to connect with musicians that I wouldn't have actually, as hard as it is, social media in our worlds, I wouldn't have met with Daniel and a lot of other musicians. So I continue to promote our album there as well. So those are the immediate plans. But hopefully this is going to be a lifelong collaboration, whether we see each other, every month or every 5 years. That I feel like at different parts in our lives, we're going to be able to find that vulnerability, even though we're very completely different people every time we see each other.
And as you can imagine, with the amount of interviews that I've had with musicians, there was a lot that took place in 2020. So just to simply hear that musicians are out and going to different countries and touring and doing it is, I think, triumphant itself. And just the collaboration and putting out music and all of that, because there was such a level of uncertainty. I think we all forget, not even necessarily forget, that time period was just like a Dali melting clock moment. It was like everything kind of just globbed together like a melted candle, and we were trying to keep pace with everything. But now that everything's happening, it's so good to be able to highlight these collaborative efforts and to hear that live shows are happening. So if anyone out there, and speaking of the pandemic, I think we learned about Bandcamp and the right way to support the artists. If people want to get a copy of this in the proper way versus streaming and other things which are available, and see you live and support what you're doing, what is the best avenue to do that?
Eyes and Ears.
Okay.
Yeah, Eyes and Ears. Yeah, start there for sure. And then we will have listings of it on our own websites, which also have information about touring and things. We will be working, if we're doing a show, probably in the summer or fall. We'll be probably collaborating with Eyes and Ears on that, and we'll bill it as a release. So there'll be some some publicity about that. Can I mention one thing about the pandemic that
Sure.
came to me that
Yeah.
you're talking about? Something that I think was really important about the pandemic was when you don't have an audience, and I'm sure a lot of people will talk about this. When you don't have an audience, what are you doing? What's the music you're going to make when you don't have an audience? and then you say, well, should I even make music without an audience?
Yeah.
And that facing that was required of a lot of people. And I mean, I also have put myself through to that question actually before the pandemic, because I thought it was artistically necessary for me to answer that, to mature. But I had to deal with it again in the pandemic. And, when you find that you've got no audience, and you've got no venue, and you've got no, the tree falls in the forest, and only you are there to hear it, what do? And then, if you make music, it's got to have to be satisfying to you, and meaningful to you in private. And so I found that to be an incredibly positive thing for my art. And I try to bring that to the duo with Ipek into everything that I'm doing, which is to just try to make the music that pleases me while conscious of there being an audience. And I feel like the pandemic really strengthened that. And I think some people, it messed them up, and other people, they got stronger from it.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have the audience, it really throws you off in terms of if you're used to depending on that for getting a sense of what you're doing and the meaning of what you're doing. You take away the audience and you have some questions you have to answer. So I think we both having come through that, it is a joy to then be able to connect and play for an audience and play with each other and have those experiences.
Yeah, since you started with that question, it was heavy for me not to start bringing all dramatic things, but COVID times were extremely difficult for me as it affected me in that small or big percentage of people who had long COVID. I was in Holland, went to see a wonderful wonderful festival called Leges. It's experimental, just great. And that's where I got COVID. And then following the next 9 months, I actually was not able to get out of bed. And still healing, still have to be on lots of drugs. It's hard, we don't hear that anymore, but we are out there, people who dealt with it. So the reason when I'm bringing this up, it wasn't only that I wasn't able to do music, it was just completely off. Like I was out of normal life. So when I came back, when I had a stable, be able to breathe, be able to move, be able to eat, take care of my own daughter, it was just this, I just had to have all that's in me out and share with people, because then I said, there's no time.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
one life, and I can't think of, is it as good, or maybe I shouldn't. No, it's in there. It's gonna come out, and it's gonna go to people who would like to be there at that moment, would like to receive it. And I'm going to keep growing with sound. So that COVID times, incredibly effective and impactful in so many ways on artists, to everyone else, but in different ways. And it definitely brought the idea to me is to don't keep it to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't die with it. I just say I'm gonna die, but I'm not gonna die keeping all of it in me. And that's what I learned during that time. That's what I kept imagining, making music. I just wanted to make music, and that's what I'm doing.
Well said. Explorers is the new album. Thank you so much for collaborating again on this interview to talk about the album. Best of luck with everything. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much.
You bet one.